everybody, this is Alexander Fitzgerald, or Assassinato, back doing another webinar for Jonathan Little. Today we're going to be discussing the 5 post-flop tricks you can use. This is some unconventional wisdom, but definitely really fun when you get into it. So let's just go ahead. What you will learn in today's webinar. Today I will show you some unconventional post-flop plays that I don't always get to teach. I've used these in the field constantly to great effect. I appreciate you guys being here today so I can get these ideas on paper. So let's get you right in the action because that's going to be really fun. If you've never done a lesson with me before, I'd recommend you have a pen and paper for notes so you can write down what your answer was and then compare it with my own answers. In this hand, you're in the middle stages of a tournament. You raise on the button with ace of diamonds, 10 of clubs. The big blind calls you. He has been your typical reg, willing to mix it up just a little bit. The flop comes jack of diamonds, 5 of diamonds, 4 of spades. The big blind checks to you. Here, what would you like to do? So time's up. Already know what you want to do there. Technically, any bet here should turn a profit. That's why I'm not putting the red color on any of the options because all B, C, D, and E even turn a profit. But with the ace of diamonds and ace high, I like putting this hand in my checking range because there's a lot of turn cards that allow me to call. I would typically lean toward that one if you're trying to be a little more careful versus opponents. So you check here, and the turn comes the 10 of spades, and the big blind leads out. What do you want to do? This one I'll give you the full 30 on. All right, so let's get into this. This one's a really fun one, guys. So you can call. A call is totally fine, but another play that a lot of people never consider here that is really helpful is raising to 900. One person said raise to 750. I don't mind that as well. I found this one player years ago when I was trying to study outliers in the data. So what I was trying to do is I was just studying as many poker players as I can. Just professional players that were kind enough to open up with their hands that I could analyze with. And I found one guy who was very successful and very unconventional that used to do this play a lot. And when you analyze it, it really makes a lot of sense. Now, when I show this play to many people, they seem aghast, which means we're not thinking about everything we could possibly be thinking about when we play. Because think about it this way, there's 3 categories of hands in most situations if you want to simplify things heads up. There's 2 pair or better pairs in high cards. Whenever you're doing basic ranging and you're having a hard time visualizing your opponent's range, you should just start with that. Now, as far as us playing 2 pair or better pairs are high cards when we play poker, 2 pairs or better are easy to play. And you tend to just play them fast and you usually get value. There's very few players who can make high cards work for value. That's why it's always on poker Twitter when a guy makes a big call with them. It's such a rarity. How you will play pairs will make or break you in No Limit Hold'em. Always think of a raise or bet first. Get in that habit. If you just auto call with pairs or pot control, there are times that can be okay, but you'll never make as much money as you could possibly make versus low to medium stakes opponents who will let you get considerable value. Think of what he's leading out here. So we check back on this flop of jack of diamonds, 5 of diamonds, 4 of spades. So what you're looking at right now is Flopzilla. I really love Flopzilla because it's great for helping us visualize ranges because otherwise that's very difficult for the mind to do. To put all these combinations together at once. So we have our hand right here is underneath dead cards, and here is the flop, and this is his range, we suppose. So we check back on this flop, which means we keep in his entire preflop calling range. You'll notice you have 54% equity versus his leading range here if he leads draws in second pairs, which is pretty typical. So what you're looking at here, what I did is I put a blue filter next to everything I thought was leading, and I didn't have him leading weak pairs, but I did have him leading middle pairs. and the flush draws and open-ended straight draws. And right here, I click this button from red to green, and that gives us a good idea of how much equity we have versus this range, which would be 54%. Now, I think that's a very conservative estimate because most guys lead any pair there, and if he's leading any pair there, like many guys do after the flop goes check, check, you have 65% equity. That doesn't even account for any bluffs. The other question I always want to ask my friends there when they calling is fine, but it puts you in a sticky situation. I believe it's more profitable to raise, especially versus basic competition or just low to mid stakes players. If you're playing a $500 event in Vegas, this will work really well, a $1,000 event. But if you were calling on that turn, I always want to know what was your plan on the river. A river 3, 8, queen, king, 9, diamond, or spade was bad for you. Unless you're the best at staring at a guy and knowing if he has it, you should raise here and get value while you can. The vast majority of guys will just call with their draws there. If they raise again, they only have one card to come and they committed their 50 big blind stack. If they have a pair, they'll convince themselves you have a draw and call to, quote, reevaluate on the river. Get your money now. By the way, if you're playing live and they check to you dark on the river, that's usually not a draw. Draws want the option to lead the river. If the guy leads the river, it tends to be the joint. He made his draw. If he checks to you, you have the option of firing again for thin value too, based on his turn call. You still want this option if the river is a 10 or an ace. That's why of the 5 post-flop tricks you can use, the first one is raise pairs on the turn to get money from weak leads. All right, guys, let's do another one. In this hand, I'm going to keep them coming fast today. In this hand, you raise 8-9 suited on the button. You are playing a live $200 tournament in Vegas versus a nice guy in his mid-40s. He calls out of the big blind. This board comes out 7 of spades, 5 of spades, 4 of clubs. He checks to you. We bet the flop, 300 into 630. He calls pretty quickly and casually. He shakes his wrist out after he puts in the call like his wrist is hurting. The turn is the queen of hearts and he checks. What would you like to do here? It's a fun one. Think of how many times you're in this spot, right? We should give it a lot of thought right now. We'll think about this a lot, like right here, and then that'll set us up for like the next 3,000 times this will come up. Well, an option a lot of people don't think about. Again, this is another one of those situations in No Limit Hold'em where you can justify a lot of different actions, but there's certain ones that seem to work really well in low to medium stakes games. If you check there because you go, look, this guy's got a 7 or a 5 and he's not folding, I think there's a lot of credibility for that. A check here is fine. Betting the turn is good too, but only if you're willing to triple barrel, and many guys aren't willing to do that. But the option many people don't consider is the overbet here on the turn. Guys, when he calls you on the flop automatically there, what does he have? Like, what is the best hand he has? That's another great thing to think about. Every time you see bet a flop, think about what is the best hand he could have. He didn't need to think. If he flopped a set there, don't you think he would need to think about raising? Even if he had the nuts here, he'd have to think about raising with the flush draw out there. He probably would have 3-bet 10-10 and higher pre-flop. Two pair, if he had 2 pair on that board, he would need to think about raising. When he calls on that flop, his range caps out at a pair of 7s, maybe pocket 8s. Could you imagine being in his spot in checking here on the turn in a live tournament and a guy bets 2,000 into 1,200? How would you feel with 10-7 of diamonds here? Would you be thinking, yes, he bet 2K into 1,200 and I have 10-7 on a 7-5-4 queen board and there's still one street to play. Awesome. most people, I do this play a lot, and I do it a lot with low to mid stakes players. What most people do is they yell at me and then they fold their 5 or something like that, right? If you don't like this play, this overbet, let me ask a couple of questions. One, have you ever done it? I do this play a lot, and it really works a lot of the time. I fully admit 1 time out of 10 I get caught, right? But that doesn't dissuade me from doing it the other 9 out of 10 times. My first question is always, have you ever done it? Because if I said I hate this book, but I've never read it, you'd think I was a crazy person. But many people in poker don't even analyze a play before they poo-poo it. My second question, what does he have to defend with there in order to not be getting exploited? This is really interesting, guys. Pay attention to this. Let's say he calls us with some straights and overpairs, and he check raises his flush draws, and he doesn't call with gut shots. That is a lot of stipulations I'm giving this guy in his favor. Normally on that turn, he's sitting holding his extremities with half the earth and gut shots in his range, but we'll give him this, okay? So if we bet 2,000 into the turn, that's even more than 1.5x pot, okay? So we would be risking 2,000 to win 3,180 because we do get back our bet when it succeeds. If you think about it, if you're flipping a coin and each of you are putting up 50 bucks, you wouldn't do 50 divided by 50 because then it would just be 1 and you don't need to succeed at a coin flip 100% of the time. It would be 50 divided by 100. So if we bet 2,000 into the turn, even more than 1.5x the pot, then this bet needs to work 63% of the time, which means he needs to call or raise or do something with 37% of the hands he called the flop with. Even if he calls on the turn with every single 7, he's still not hitting 37%. By the way, if he just calls, we get a free chance to hit an 8, 9, or 6. He's giving us more equity. And if he calls on the flop with flush draws and gut shots, he's folding on the turn 72% of the time, even if he calls with every single 7. So what you're seeing is I've isolated what he check called with on the flop, and then I took it to the turn, and we assume he's probably folding, just his bare straight draws and flush draws on that turn. And then even if he's defending with every single 7, because so much is missed on that turn, he's still folding 72% of the time. And honestly, when I do this play, because I mean, think about it, you're in this spot, guys. Remember, our bet only needed to work 62% of the time. And it's likely working 72% of the time if he's only defending 28% of the time. Also, imagine having 9-7 of diamonds here, guys, in a Vegas tournament, and somebody just bet 20x into you. You probably would just, if you figured it out, good for you, but I have a lot of people show me the hand after 2 minutes of thinking, and they're just like, fine, take it. You end up looking a little bit like an imbecile who's overplaying their set, who's really worried about a flush draw, which is great. That's the exact image we want. That's why of the 5 post-flop tricks you can use, number 2 is overbet the turn when your opponent caps his range. All right, guys, here we go. We're going to keep them coming. You're in a live tournament in Vegas, a 1K. The cutoff is a younger guy. He's been very aggressive so far, although you don't know a ton about him. You call out of the big blind because you're not sure what to do versus his 4-bet if you 3-bet, and you think he's probably 4-betting often. You want to give him a chance to hang himself. The board comes Jack of diamonds, 7 of clubs, 4 of clubs. You check call on this flop to allow him to keep firing. This turn comes out the 2 of hearts. You check to him, and he quickly bets 450. You call. The river is the king of hearts. Now here, do you want to lead out? Do you want to check fold? Do you want to check call? Or do you want to check raise? So what you should do is you should lead out here. You should bet 1,300. Why lead there? Guys, what did you think of this turn lead? I want you guys looking for this because you'll see this a lot from grinding regulars, okay? I really pay attention to this next part because I started making way more money at No Limit Hold'em once I started being able to spot this. What did you think of his turn lead? Think about it. If he had a set, wouldn't he be trying to get more value? If he had a draw, wouldn't he be betting more, trying to get us to fold a 7 or something like that? What he's doing is what a lot of aggressive players do. It's called buying the showdown. Unfortunately, he's doing it to a player who can see through it, and he's given away the strength of his hand through his sizing. So in this guy's defense, this play is going to work versus most people because, well, 90% of the people in the chat didn't say lead out. So if he is trying to get a cheap showdown and get a little value out of 5-6, maybe some lesser pairs, some flush draws and whatnot, he's going to get a showdown, a really cheap showdown there. It's a good play, but I want you guys to be able to spot it so you can take advantage of them. And the way a lot of them give it away, if he just bets a normal amount here, it's really hard to pick up on it unless you've seen the guy bet really thin on the turn before. That's why you should always be taking notes when you play. But if the guy underbets, he really gives it away. It's really hard to find a person who will do that with a set or a draw. That's usually a pair that's trying to get to a showdown really cheaply. So if you have something like ace jack, which is beating almost all those pairs, you have to lead out there. And just so you guys can see this, the ranging side, he c-bets likely 100% of his range versus a big blind flatter. That is reality. Most guys do that a little too much. We did say he was aggressive, not a pot controller. And if that's the case, when he bets that small on the turn, he gives away that he has a pair that he's trying to get to showdown. We have 74% equity against that range, even if he's doing that with overpairs, which he's usually not. That king of hearts is not likely to have helped our opponent. We still have the best hand 7 times out of 10. If we lead, he's likely to call wide because he can always justify it to himself as a missed flush draw or straight draw to hero call with. If this is a live tournament, the guy doesn't even have to show his hand. In his mind, you're polarized. You have just the absolute best hand or you have a lot of missed draws. And aggressive players like this guy really wants to play all the time, so that'll make him want to call with all the missed draws out there. So this looks really good for us. They'll usually muck something like this that wanted to check back the river. That's why the third of the 5 post-flop tricks you can use is lead the river for value versus opponents who are trying to buy the showdown. All right, guys, I'm going to keep them going fast. It's more fun that way. Let's start with something I see a lot of you guys doing, just calling out of the big blind 50 big blinds deep when your opponent raises the cutoff and you're in the big blind, okay? So your opponent raises here in the cutoff to 2.5x. You're about 50x deep. You don't really know what to do when you 3-bet, any 4-bets. So you just go ahead and call. You tell me the guy is aggressive and decent, so you don't want to deal with that when you 3-bet. So let's go with that. He's aggressive and decent. Let's pretend we're playing against that guy. All right, so we call here. We get this awesome flop. What is your plan of action? You want to donk lead, check call, then check the turn? Do you want to check call, then lead the turn? Or do you want to check raise? Now, okay, so we're done there. This is a really fun one. I love this as a thought experiment because now that you're looking at all of them, it's kind of crazy you pick B all the time, right? When I started playing, I used to do B there all the time, like check call, then check. Not really thinking like, what is he bluffing? Most people, when they see bet that board and you check the turn, they go, oh, he's got an ace. Like, okay, I'm done. Now, here's a better question. I'll let you guys know every single one of these turns a profit, obviously. You have the deck hammered. Which one do you think makes the most money? The one I found makes the most money on average, and I have actually tried this out a lot of different ways, is the check raise. Check call lead works very well, but people are getting a little wary to it. I noticed a lot of you guys picked that one. That's a good option as well. Check call check, I don't think gets as many bluffs as maybe it used to back when people were a little bit more flippant about what they did. Donk lead does turn a profit. The problem is if the guy has like 10-8 of diamonds, you just lose that C bet that you're most likely going to get when you just completed from the big blind. So the one that tends to make the most money is the check raise. Every time I do this against an aggressive player, they seem to have this one thought. He wouldn't do that with an ace. He's so polarized here. So I get 600 more from 8-8, 9-9, 10-10, Jack-Jack, Queen-Queen, even though I lose them on the turn a lot. But even though there's not much difference, the aces in this guy's range seem to go broke a lot. Good players that I've never really seen make a mistake before will really overcommit here. It blows my mind when I see people not wanting to put players in this spot now, especially now when hero calling has become so in vogue. And you can't know for a fact he's raising king 3 here, king 3 suited there, but for sure he's raising all of his suited aces and most likely most of his offsuit aces. So the ace high board is a great board to play fast for value because he has so many hands you're going to be making so much money from. That's why the fourth post-flop trick you can use is check raise ace high boards with the best kickers. So, all right, guys, we have one more. I tried to keep these a little quicker tonight because your time is very valuable to me and just want to keep it fun. So in this hand, you are at the beginning of a tournament, 100 big blinds. You know nothing about any of the opponents yet. You raise on the button. The big blind calls you. The board comes ace of hearts, 2 of hearts, 3 of clubs. It's check to you. What is your bet? This is a spot we all tend to play the same way, but if you think about it, it's one of those spots we do automatically, and we should really think about this a bit more because I think honestly the correct answer is E. Check. Let's say you have a hyper-aggressive opponent, check can work if you think he's just going to bluff his butt off on the turn in river, but that's a very rare situation, so I did assign that a red designation. Obviously, betting 1/3 pot, a half pot, 2/3 pot does show a profit, but I think 3/4 pot is what you want, as big as you can get. This is one the GTO guys taught me, and it just makes perfect sense once you think of it. The fun stuff about the GTO things in the solvers is sometimes, or just any AI you bring into poker, is sometimes the computer will say, do this. And you'll go, why? Why does nobody do that? And then you think about it for a while and it makes perfect sense. You're obviously betting for value here, right? What hand is your opponent calling 300 with that he's not calling 550 with? A flush draw will call. You want all the aces to start paying you big, and there's a ton of them. His king highs and pocket sixes will still likely call you once based on how deep your stacks are. If we're not betting big here, we're just leaving money on the table. Now the funny question is, people say, so what do you do if you miss this flop? To me, this is the most exploitative line ever, right? Because if you want to be balanced, you have to pick one bet here and go with it, right? So if you miss, you should go big, and you'll still turn a profit, right? And when you hit, you should go big. Or you can go really small. But I honestly think if nobody knows who you are, this guy in the big blind, if he has like queen 7 of diamonds, if you breathe on this pot, he's folding. And that's pretty much the only hands that are going to fold. King high is probably not folding to anything, but anything below queen high is folding to anything. So if you're betting trying to get a fold, this is very exploitative, and you cannot exploit others without becoming exploitable yourself. If nobody knows who you are, I'd just bet a third pot if you miss this board, assuming this is just the first hand. But if I hit, I would bet bigger. Now, obviously, as the game goes on, you can't keep that up. You should adapt a balanced strategy, or if you want to play ball, if you want to play money ball, you can try to play rock, paper, scissors and outguess the guy, just like major league pitchers do. It's up to you. Neither is wrong. Both schools of thought can learn from each other. There should not be this big war between the GTO guys and the exploitative guys. Most of the GTO practitioners will tell you that they use a lot of exploitative lines, and the exploitative guys should learn vice versa, right? So anyways, guys, recapping, the 5 post-flop tricks you can use. Number 1, raise pairs on the turn to get money from weak leads. Number 2, overbet the turn when your opponent caps his range. Number 3, lead the river for value versus opponents who are trying to buy the showdown. Number 4, check raise ace-high boards with the best kickers. And number 5, bet bigger on ace-high boards when you have the ace.